while Emily Carter prepared another cup of strong coffee. Her tired eyes betrayed another sleepless night, divided between late reports and constant worry about her father, who slept in the next room. "Dad, have you taken your medicine?" she asked, placing a tray with a simple breakfast on the bedside table. The thin, pale man nodded with a weak smile. "You don't need to worry so much, darling. You already do too much." Emily adjusted his pillows, checked his temperature, and made sure he was comfortable before preparing for another workday. The mirror reflected a 28-year-old woman who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her clothes, though well kept, already showed signs of constant use. Checking her bank account on her phone, Emily sighed. Her salary as an executive assistant barely covered basic expenses and her father's medications. Since her mother passed away when she was only 15, taking on responsibilities had become second nature to her. On the street, Emily nervously checked her watch. The subway was delayed again, and ride-sharing app prices had skyrocketed due to rush hour. She couldn't afford to spend that much, but she also couldn't be late for work. "Another month like this and I'll have to ask for a loan," she muttered to herself, mentally calculating her expenses while pacing back and forth on the busy sidewalk. The cold morning wind whipped her face when a gleaming black Audi pulled up beside her, the tinted windows smoothly lowered, revealing a man who appeared to be about 35, wearing an impeccable suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "Heading to Montgomery Enterprises as well?" he asked, noticing the company badge on her bag. His voice was deep and polite, with a slight accent Emily couldn't quite place. She hesitated, clutching her bag strap. Years of caution and common sense screamed for her to ignore the offer, but something in his look, perhaps the evident sincerity or the fact that he was a co-worker, made her reconsider. "Yes," she finally answered, still uncertain. "I can give you a ride. It would be a waste to go separately to the same place, don't you think?" Emily looked at her watch once more, then at the threatening sky, and then at the man who smiled kindly. Against her better judgment, she nodded. "Thank you, that would be very kind." What felt like a harmless decision, accepting a ride, would soon unravel into a series of events she could have never predicted. The luxury car's interior smelled of expensive leather and subtle cologne. Emily sat stiffly, her worn bag clutched tightly on her lap, feeling out of place in the pristine environment. The man introduced himself simply as Ethan, his eyes occasionally glancing at her through the rear-view mirror. "You seem tense," he noted, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "I assure you I'm harmless, just a Montgomery employee like yourself." Emily managed a small smile. "Sorry, it's just, I don't usually accept rides from strangers. But thank you, really. The transportation cost today would have been a nightmare." "Financial troubles?" Ethan asked, his tone casual but interested. She hesitated before answering. "Everyone has their struggles, right?" "Indeed." He navigated through traffic with practiced ease. "I've noticed you before, you know. Always first to arrive, last to leave. That kind of dedication is rare." Emily shifted uncomfortably. "It's nothing special. Just doing my job. And caring for someone, I assume." When she looked startled, he added, "The medical prescriptions that fell from your bag when you got in. Sorry, I couldn't help but notice." "My father," she admitted quietly. "He's been ill for a while now." The car stopped at a red light, and Ethan turned slightly to face her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held genuine interest. That must be challenging, handling both work and care responsibilities. "You don't get the luxury of choice," Emily said, her voice steady but tired. "You just do what needs to be done." The rest of the ride passed with Ethan asking subtle questions about her work, her routine, her challenges. Something about his manner made it easy to talk to him, despite her initial reservations. He listened intently, occasionally offering thoughtful comments. As they approached Montgomery Enterprises' imposing glass building, Emily noticed how other employees watched the car with a mixture of curiosity and respect. She suddenly felt self-conscious about being seen emerging from such a vehicle. "Thank you again for the ride," she said quickly, reaching for the door handle. "Emily," Ethan called as she stepped out. "Sometimes the right opportunities come in unexpected ways. Don't be too quick to dismiss them." Before she could respond, he had already driven away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk, puzzled by his cryptic words. As she walked into the building, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Ethan than he had revealed. She headed to her desk in the executive assistant pool, trying to focus on the day ahead. But her mind kept drifting back to the mysterious man in the Audi, his penetrating gaze, and the way he seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. Little did she know, up in the penthouse office, Ethan Montgomery was already making plans to see more of the intriguing young woman who had caught his attention. The next morning, Emily arrived early as usual, her mind still dwelling on yesterday's unusual encounter. The office buzzed with its typical morning energy as she settled at her desk, organizing the day's tasks. "Did you hear?" whispered Sarah from the next cubicle. "The CEO is doing surprise department visits today. Everyone's on edge." Emily barely registered the information, focused on reviewing urgent reports. That changed when familiar footsteps approached her desk. Looking up, she froze. There stood Ethan, but not in the casual manner of yesterday. He wore an expertly tailored suit, surrounded by a group of executives who hung on his every word. "And this is our executive assistant department," he was saying. Then his eyes met hers. "Ah, Ms. Carter. Good morning." Emily felt the blood drain from her face as realization hit her. The man who had given her a ride wasn't just another employee. He was Ethan Montgomery, CEO of the company. The mysterious man in the Audi was her boss's boss. "Good morning, Mr. Montgomery," she managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady despite her internal panic. "Your report on the Asian market projections was excellent," he commented naturally, as if their previous encounter had never happened. "I'd like to see more of that kind of analysis." Whispers erupted around them. Emily could feel countless eyes boring into her, questions forming on everyone's lips. How did the CEO know about her report? Why was he singling her out? "Thank you, sir," she replied professionally, fighting to maintain her composure. As the group moved on, Emily sat frozen at her desk. Her mind raced through yesterday's conversation. She had talked about her financial struggles with the CEO, had complained about transportation costs to the owner of the company, had let her guard down completely with the most powerful man in the building. "Oh my God, Emily," Sarah whispered excitedly once the group was out of earshot. "Since when does the CEO know your name and your work?" I'm not sure," she lied, unable to process the situation fully. Throughout the day, Emily caught glimpses of Ethan in various parts of the building. Each time he maintained his professional demeanor, but she could swear she saw a hint of amusement in his eyes whenever their gazes met. By day's end, Emily's emotions had cycled through embarrassment, anger, and confusion. Why hadn't he told her who he really was? Was yesterday some kind of test? And most importantly, what did it mean for her job? As she packed up to leave, her computer pinged with a new email. "Ms. Carter, your presence is requested in the executive conference room tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. Regards, EM." Emily stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Emily stepped into the towering glass building, her heart pounding. She had no idea that behind those walls, decisions had already been made, ones that would alter her career and her life forever. The next few days brought subtle but noticeable changes to Emily's routine. She'd arrive at work to find a fresh coffee on her desk, exactly how she liked it. Important projects would mysteriously land in her inbox, offering opportunities to showcase her skills. And occasionally she'd catch Ethan watching her from across the office, his expression thoughtful. "The quarterly reports need review," her immediate supervisor announced one morning. "Emily, Mr. Montgomery specifically requested you for this task." Her colleagues' expressions ranged from envy to curiosity. Emily kept her head down, focusing on the work rather than the whispers around her. But she couldn't ignore the way Ethan seemed to appear whenever she needed guidance on the project. "You have good instincts," he told her during one such meeting, "but you're holding back." "Why?" Emily fidgeted with her pen. "With all due respect, Mr. Montgomery, I'm just trying to do my job properly." "Ethan," he corrected. "At least in private meetings. And you're capable of much more than just proper work." Later that week, Emily declined another office happy hour invitation. She couldn't justify spending money on drinks when her father's medical bills were piling up. As she packed up her things, Ethan appeared at her desk. "You never join the team events," he observed. "I have responsibilities at home," she replied simply. His eyes softened. "How is your father?" The genuine concern in his voice caught her off guard. "Managing the new treatment is expensive, but we're hoping it helps." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. The next day, Emily's inbox displayed an unexpected email from HR, a performance bonus. She stared at the screen, conflicted. Had she truly earned it, or was this another of Ethan's discreet interventions? When she tried to question it, HR insisted it was standard procedure for employees handling special projects. During lunch breaks, She'd sometimes find Ethan sitting nearby in the company cafeteria, casually striking up conversations about work, books, or current events. Despite her initial reservations, Emily found herself looking forward to these interactions. "You're different from what I expected," she admitted during one such conversation. "Oh, and what did you expect from the big bad CEO? Someone more," she gestured vaguely, "corporate." His laugh was warm and genuine. "Life's too short for pretense, don't you think? Besides, I find honesty refreshing. It's rare in my position." As weeks passed, Emily noticed small changes in herself too. She stood straighter, spoke more confidently in meetings, and began to see her own potential through Ethan's eyes. But with each kind gesture and meaningful conversation, she felt herself developing feelings she knew she shouldn't have. One evening, as she prepared to leave, Ethan stopped by her desk one final time. "There's an important corporate gala next weekend," he said casually. "Your presence would be valuable." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Sir, I don't think—" "Ethan," he reminded her gently. "And it wasn't a request. The company needs its best people there." As she watched him walk away, Emily realized she was in dangerous territory. The line between professional appreciation and personal interest was becoming increasingly blurred, and she wasn't sure how to handle it. Emily spent hours staring at her closet the night before the gala, fighting anxiety about her wardrobe choices. Nothing seemed appropriate for such a high-profile event. Finally, she settled on her one black cocktail dress, simple but elegant, though clearly not designer wear. The gala was being held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, its marble lobby filled with the city's elite. Emily felt out of place the moment she stepped through the doors, clutching her small purse like a lifeline. "You came." Ethan's voice behind her made her jump. He looked striking in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his presence commanding attention from everyone nearby. "Did I have a choice?" she asked, attempting to joke despite her nervousness. "There's always a choice," he smiled, offering his arm. "Shall we?" Throughout the evening, Ethan stayed close, introducing her to key business figures and smoothly integrating her into conversations about company projects. Emily was surprised to find herself handling these interactions with growing confidence. "You mentioned the Asian market expansion earlier," one board member said to her. "I'd love to hear more about your analysis." As Emily explained her insights, she noticed Ethan watching her with unmistakable pride. Later, during a quiet moment, they found themselves alone on the hotel's terrace. "You're remarkable," he said softly. "Do you know that?" Emily felt her cheeks warm. "I'm just doing my job." "No," he shook his head. "You're extraordinary. The way you care for your father, how you handle every challenge. I've never met anyone quite like you." The air between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. Emily's heart raced as Ethan stepped closer, his hand barely brushing hers. "Mr. Montgomery—" "Ethan," he corrected gently. "Please, Ethan," she whispered, taking a step back. This isn't just a simple office romance. There's too much at stake for both of us." "Shouldn't what?" His voice was low, intimate. "Have an honest conversation, acknowledge this connection." Before Emily could respond, they were interrupted by another executive wanting Ethan's attention. The moment broke, but something had fundamentally shifted between them. On Monday morning, Emily found a small package on her desk. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a note. "Thank you for making the evening memorable, E." She should have returned it immediately. It wasn't appropriate. Instead, she slipped it into her drawer, her fingers lingering on the fine chain. Throughout the day, their eyes met across rooms and hallways, each glance carrying the weight of unspoken words. Emily tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the terrace, to the way Ethan had looked at her, to the possibility of something more. But as she left work that evening, reality crashed back. Her father had another medical appointment tomorrow, bills were due, and she couldn't afford to dream about impossible relationships with powerful CEOs. Still, when she got home and found the bracelet had somehow slipped into her purse, she didn't take it back. Instead, she placed it carefully on her nightstand where it caught the last rays of sunset, sparkling with possibilities she dared not name. "Emily, you need to go and have fun," her father insisted, looking at the formal invitation on their kitchen table. Ethan had sent it via courier, a request for her presence at an exclusive corporate dinner celebrating the company's biggest merger to date. "Dad, I can't leave you alone all evening," she protested, though her fingers kept tracing the embossed lettering. "Mrs. Peterson from next door already agreed to check on me. I'm not that helpless, you know." His eyes twinkled with humor. "Besides, when was the last time you did something for yourself?" The event was being held at the Ritz, and Emily spent far too much of her savings on a deep blue evening gown. But when she walked into the grand ballroom, Ethan's reaction made it worth every penny. He stopped mid-conversation, his eyes widening slightly as he took in her appearance. "You look stunning," he said quietly when she approached. Throughout dinner, Emily found herself seated next to Ethan at the main table. Their conversation flowed naturally, ranging from business strategies to favorite books. She noticed how he seemed different here, more relaxed, more genuine. "Dance with me?" he asked as the band started playing. Emily hesitated, but his hand was already extended toward her. On the dance floor, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. Ethan held her close, but respectfully, his hand warm against her back. "I'm glad you came," he murmured. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "What changed your mind?" "My father, actually. He said I deserve a night out." Ethan's eyes softened. "He's right. You deserve so much more than you allow yourself." For a moment, Emily forgot about their different social positions, about workplace propriety, about all the reasons this was complicated. She just let herself feel the music, his presence, and the undeniable connection between them. Later, as they stood on the hotel's balcony taking in the city lights, Ethan turned to her. "Emily, But before he could finish, his assistant appeared, urgently requesting his attention for an important call from overseas investors. "I'm sorry," he said, genuine regret in his voice. "We'll continue this conversation soon?" Emily nodded, watching him leave. She knew this evening would change things between them. She just wasn't sure how. "He's what?" Emily nearly dropped her coffee cup in the break room. Her colleague Jenny had just casually mentioned that Ethan Montgomery wasn't just any executive. He was the company's founder and CEO. "You didn't know?" Jenny looked surprised. "He started the company from scratch 10 years ago, built it into what it is today. Everyone knows the story. It's like company legend." Emily felt the room spin. All those conversations, the shared rides, the dance at the dinner, she'd been interacting with the actual owner of the company without knowing it. The man worth billions had let her ramble about her financial struggles and had listened like a peer. Back at her desk, Emily's mind raced through every interaction they'd had. How many people had watched them, knowing who he was while she remained oblivious? Had he been laughing at her naivety this whole time? "Emily?" His familiar voice made her jump. Ethan stood by her desk, holding what looked like project files. "Do you have a moment to discuss the quarterly projections?" "I'm quite busy, Mr. Montgomery," she replied coldly, emphasizing his surname. "Perhaps you should discuss it with your executive team." He blinked, caught off guard by her tone. "Is everything all right?" Emily's voice shook with betrayal. "You let me believe we were equals, that I could trust you, and all this time you were testing me." Understanding dawned on his face. "Ah, you found out." "Found out?" Like it was some minor detail. Emily's hands trembled slightly. "You let me believe you were just another employee. Was this amusing for you?" "Emily, that's not... I shared things with you, personal things, all while you were..." "What? Studying me? Testing me?" "If you'd let me explain..." "I don't think there's anything to explain, Mr. Montgomery." She cut him off, standing up. "If you'll excuse me, I need some air." She walked quickly to the elevator, ignoring his calls after her. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm down. The woman in the mirror looked back at her, betrayed and embarrassed. From that moment, Emily decided to keep her distance. No more intimate conversations, no more shared moments. She would be professional, nothing more. If Ethan Montgomery wanted to play games with people's feelings, he would have to find another target. For the next 2 weeks, Emily perfected the art of professional avoidance. She redirected all communication with Ethan through his assistant, arrived earlier to dodge potential morning encounters, and took lunch at odd hours to ensure their paths wouldn't cross. When meetings were unavoidable, she maintained a rigid formality that left no room for personal interaction. Her responses became clipped, her reports strictly business-focused. If Ethan tried to engage her in conversation, she found ways to excuse herself quickly. "Emily, you're miserable," her father observed one evening as she picked at her dinner. "And don't tell me it's nothing. I know my daughter." "It's just work stress, Dad," she mumbled, but her father wasn't fooled. "This wouldn't have anything to do with that young man you mentioned, the one from work?" Emily's fork clattered against her plate. "He lied to me." "Did he?" her father asked gently. "Or did he just not tell you everything right away?" "It's the same thing." "Is it?" He reached across the table to pat her hand. Sometimes people in positions of power just want to be seen for who they are, not what they have. Emily sat back, considering his words. She remembered how natural Ethan had been during their conversations, how genuinely interested he seemed in her thoughts and opinions. At work, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. She could feel Ethan's eyes on her during meetings, could sense his frustration at her walls. Once she caught him standing near her desk, looking at the empty spot where she used to sit during their lunch conversations. "Miss Carter," his assistant approached one afternoon, "Mr. Montgomery would like to schedule a meeting to discuss your recent project proposals." "Email them to him," Emily replied automatically. "He specifically requested an in-person meeting. I'm afraid my schedule is full." Later that day, she found a handwritten note on her desk. "I never meant to hurt you. Please let me explain. E." Emily crumpled the note, but couldn't bring herself to throw it away. Instead, she tucked it into her drawer right next to the silver bracelet she still couldn't return. That night, as she helped her father with his medication, he said softly, "Sometimes the biggest regrets come not from what we did, but from what we were too afraid to hear." Emily lay awake that night, wondering if her hurt pride was worth the growing void she felt inside. Emily was reviewing her father's medical bills when she noticed something odd. The hospital had marked several expensive treatments as paid in full. Confused, she called the billing department. "Yes, Ms. Carter, the treatments were covered by the Montgomery Foundation," the clerk explained cheerfully. "It's a special program for employees' families. Didn't you apply for it?" Emily felt the room spin. There was no such program. She would have known about it. This had Ethan written all over it. She stormed into the office the next morning, determination burning in her eyes. When Ethan's assistant tried to stop her, she pushed past, entering his office unannounced. "You had no right," she said, her voice shaking. Ethan looked up from his desk, his expression carefully neutral. "Good morning, Emily. The hospital bills, my father's treatment. That was you." He set down his pen and stood slowly. "Your father deserves the best care available." "I don't need your charity." "It's not charity," he said quietly. "I care about you, Emily, both of you." "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you do this?" "Because I couldn't bear watching you struggle when I had the means to help." He moved closer, his eyes intense. "Because every time you mentioned another bill, another treatment you could barely afford, it broke my heart." Emily felt tears threatening. "I can't accept this." "Then consider it a loan if you must. But please," his voice softened, "don't let pride stand in the way of your father's health." She sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed. "I don't understand you, Ethan. First you hide who you are, then you do something like this." "I hid my position because for once I wanted someone to see me as just Ethan, not the CEO, not the wealthy businessman, just me." He knelt beside her chair. "And you did. You were real with me, honest. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the sincerity in his eyes. She remembered all their conversations, how he'd listened to her stories, shared her concerns, respected her opinions. "I'm still angry with you," she whispered. A small smile tugged at his lips. "I know, but at least you're talking to me again." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt the wall she'd built around her heart begin to crack. The small cafe 2 blocks from the office became neutral ground. Emily sat at a corner table, watching steam rise from her untouched coffee as she waited for Ethan. They had agreed to meet here, away from the corporate environment and its watchful eyes. He arrived precisely on time, looking different in casual clothes, more approachable, more like the man she'd first met that morning on the street. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I'm here because I need to understand," Emily replied. "All of it. No more half-truths." Ethan nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "I grew up wealthy," he began. "Everything was handed to me, but it meant everyone wanted something from me. My money, my influence, my connections. Never just me." He paused, ordering a coffee when the waitress passed by. "That morning when I saw you waiting for transport, I recognized the company badge. But you didn't recognize me, and it was refreshing. The way you spoke to me, honest and direct, no agenda, no flattery. So you decided to play a game?" Emily couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "No," he said firmly. "I decided to protect something genuine. Every conversation we had, every moment we shared, it was real, Emily. More real than anything I've experienced in years. And my father's medical bills, that wasn't about manipulation. I saw someone I care about struggling and had the means to help. Wouldn't you have done the same?" Emily studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Instead, she found only sincerity and something deeper, something that made her heart race. "I'm not used to accepting help," she admitted, "especially not from someone like me," he finished with a slight smile. "Rich, powerful, or just someone who cares about you?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Emily took a sip of her now lukewarm coffee, buying time to sort through her thoughts. "I don't know how to do this," she finally said, "whatever this is between us." "Neither do I," Ethan replied honestly. "But I'd like to figure it out, together. No more secrets, no more pretense, just us." He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers, offering, not demanding. Emily paced her apartment that evening, her mind replaying the cafe conversation with Ethan. Her father watched her from his favorite armchair, a knowing smile on his face. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor, sweetheart," he teased. "I don't know what to do, Dad," she admitted, finally dropping onto the couch. "Everything he said makes sense, but you're scared," her father finished. "Scared of letting someone in, of accepting help, of being vulnerable." Emily nodded, fighting back tears. "What if it all falls apart? What if I'm just another novelty to him? Someone different from his usual world?" "What if you're not?" her father countered. "What if he's exactly what he seems, a man who fell for my amazing daughter and wants to be part of her life?" She fingered the silver bracelet she'd finally allowed herself to wear again. "It's complicated. He's my boss, technically, and the power dynamic—" "Life is complicated," her father said softly, "but sometimes the best things are worth the risk." Emily thought about Ethan's honesty at the cafe, the way his eyes held hers as he laid everything bare. She thought about their early morning conversations, how he'd listened to her ideas, respected her opinions. "I'm tired of being afraid," she whispered. Her father reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then maybe it's time to be brave instead." That night, Emily lay awake, staring at her phone. Ethan's last message sat unanswered. "Whatever you decide, know that my feelings are real." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her heart racing as she typed, "Can we talk tomorrow?" His response came instantly. "Name the time and place." For the first time in weeks, Emily fell asleep with a smile on her face. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Emily chose the rooftop garden of the office building for their meeting, a space that felt both private and public enough for comfort. When she arrived, Ethan was already there, leaning against the railing and watching the city wake up below. "Good morning," she said softly, joining him at the railing. "Good morning," he replied, turning to face her. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted, "but I've been doing a lot of thinking." The morning sun caught his face as he waited patiently for her to continue. Emily took a deep breath. "I'm not used to this, letting people help, letting them in. After Mom died, it was just Dad and me against the world. I had to be strong, independent, reliable." "You still can be," Ethan said. "Being with someone doesn't mean losing yourself." "I know that now, and I realize that maybe I've been so focused on protecting myself that I missed something important." "What's that?" "That sometimes strength means being brave enough to trust someone else." Ethan's expression softened. "And do you trust me?" "I'm starting to," she said honestly. "But I need you to understand something. If we do this, whatever this is, I don't want special treatment at work. No promotions, no favors. I need to know I've earned everything on my own merit." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he agreed. "Your competence is one of the things I admire most about you." Emily felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "And my father's treatment?" "Is non-negotiable," Ethan said firmly. "Not as your boss or a potential romantic interest, but as someone who cares about both of you. Please let me do this." She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, okay." His eyebrows raised in surprise. "Okay to all of it. The treatment and us. Taking things slowly, seeing where this leads." The smile that broke across his face was worth every moment of uncertainty. He reached for her hand, and this time, she let him take it. "Slow sounds perfect," he said softly. As they stood there watching the sun rise over the city, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Monday morning brought a different energy to the office. Emily walked through the doors with her head held high, no longer avoiding the curious glances from her colleagues. She had nothing to hide anymore. Well, almost nothing. She and Ethan had agreed to keep their budding relationship private for now, maintaining professional distance at work while getting to know each other better outside the office. It wasn't always easy, especially during meetings when their eyes would meet across the conference table. "Miss Carter," Ethan's assistant approached her desk mid-morning. "Mr. Montgomery would like to see you regarding the Johnson account." In his office, Ethan sat behind his desk, maintaining the professional facade they'd agreed upon, but his eyes softened when she entered. "I wanted to apologize properly," he said, once the door was closed, "for everything. Not just hiding my identity, but for making you feel like you couldn't trust me." Emily settled into the chair across from him. "I think I owe you an apology, too. I reacted strongly. You had every right to. Maybe. But I didn't give you a chance to explain. I was so caught up in my own hurt pride that I couldn't see you were trying to protect something real." Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I've never met anyone like you, Emily. Someone who sees past all of this." He gestured to his office. "To who I really am. I should have trusted that about you from the start." "We both had our walls," she admitted. "Maybe it's time to let them down." "I'd like that." He smiled, then reached into his desk drawer. "I have something for you." He pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a medical report showing her father's latest test results, all positive. "The new treatment is working," he said softly. "Your father's doctor called this morning." Emily felt tears spring to her eyes as she read the report. Without thinking, she stood and rounded the desk, wrapping her arms around him in a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered. For a moment, they stayed like that, professional boundaries forgotten. Then, remembering where they were, Emily stepped back, smoothing her skirt. "Dinner tonight?" Ethan asked. "To celebrate." "I'd like that," she smiled, heading for the door. "And Ethan, I forgive you." The look of pure joy on his face stayed with her for the rest of the day. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of stolen moments and quiet dinners. Emily and Ethan found a rhythm that worked for them, keeping their professional lives separate while building something special in their personal time. One evening, at a small Italian restaurant far from the office district, Ethan brought up something that had been on his mind. "The annual shareholders' meeting is next week," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "I'd like you to be there, officially." Emily paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "You mean, as the woman I'm seeing? If you're ready for that." She set down her fork, considering the implications. Going public would change everything: their carefully maintained professional distance, her relationships with colleagues, possibly even her career trajectory. "Are you sure?" she asked. "There will be talk. People might think—" "Let them think what they want," Ethan interrupted gently. "I'm tired of pretending I don't light up every time you walk into a room. I'm tired of watching you from across the office and having to act like you're just another employee." Emily felt her heart race. "It could complicate things." "Life is complicated," he smiled, echoing her father's words from weeks ago. "But you're worth every complication." The next week, Emily stood before her mirror, smoothing down her new dress, a gift from Ethan that she'd initially tried to refuse. The shareholders' meeting would be her first official appearance as Ethan Montgomery's partner. "You look beautiful," her father said from his chair, looking healthier than he had in months, and nervous. "What if they don't accept me?" she whispered. "Then that's their loss," he replied firmly. "But anyone who sees how happy you make each other would be a fool to question it." At the meeting, Ethan introduced her proudly to board members and investors alike. Some eyebrows raised, but his confident demeanor and obvious affection made it clear this wasn't just some office romance. "Ms. Carter's insights have been invaluable to our Asian market expansion," he told one particularly skeptical board member. "Her business acumen speaks for itself." Later at the reception, Emily overheard two executives talking. "Have you ever seen him like this?" "Never. He's different with her. More grounded, more human." As the evening drew to a close, Ethan found her on the balcony, away from the crowd. "Regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Not one," she replied, leaning back against him. "Though I think Mrs. Henderson from accounting nearly had a heart attack when you kissed my hand." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "Let them adjust. I'm not hiding how I feel about you anymore." Emily turned in his arms, facing him. "And how do you feel?" Instead of answering, he kissed her, right there on the balcony, not caring who might see. When they broke apart, his eyes were serious. "I love you, Emily Carter. No more secrets. No more hiding." For the first time in her life, Emily didn't overthink her response. "I love you too." 2 months into their public relationship, Emily faced new challenges she hadn't anticipated. While Ethan remained unchanged in his treatment of her, both professionally and personally, the office dynamics had shifted noticeably. One morning, she overheard whispers in the break room. She must have planned this from the start. Wonder how long before she gets promoted to VP. Sleeping her way to the top. Classic move. Emily gripped her coffee cup tighter, but held her head high as she walked past. Later that day, she found herself dwelling on the comments during a department meeting. "Miss Carter, your thoughts on the proposed marketing strategy?" her direct supervisor asked, his tone slightly different than before, almost deferential, as if afraid to challenge her. "I think it needs work," she said firmly, spreading out her notes. "The demographic analysis is incomplete, and we're missing key market indicators. I'd suggest a complete revision before presenting to the board." She could feel eyes on her, wondering if she was flexing her new influence, but Ethan, sitting at the head of the table, simply nodded professionally. "I agree. Johnson, work with Ms. Carter's team to refine the proposal. We need solid data before moving forward." That evening in Ethan's penthouse apartment, Emily finally voiced her concerns. "They treat me differently now," she said, curled up on his luxurious couch. "Either they're afraid to criticize my work, or they assume I'm using you for advancement." Ethan set down his wineglass, turning to face her fully. "Does it bother you because you believe them?" "No." She sat up straighter. "I know what we have is real, but I've worked so hard to build my reputation. And you think being with me diminishes that?" "Sometimes," she admitted quietly. "I see how people look at me now. Like I'm not Emily Carter who worked her way up, but Emily Carter who caught the CEO's eye." Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "When I started this company, people said I only succeeded because of my family's connections, that I didn't earn it. It took years to prove them wrong." He reached for her hand. "Your work speaks for itself, Emily. Those who matter know your value has nothing to do with our relationship. But what if they're right? What if being with you does give me unfair advantages? Is that why you turned down the promotion last week?" Emily looked away. She had indeed refused a significant career advancement, worried it would validate the office gossip. "You're punishing yourself for other people's prejudices," Ethan said softly. "That promotion was earned. Your track record proves it. I just want to succeed on my own merit. You already have, and you will continue to do so." He cupped her face gently. "Being with me doesn't diminish your achievements. If anything, it challenges you to work harder to prove yourself." Emily leaned into his touch, feeling some of her tension ease. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the time I fell in love with an incredibly stubborn, fiercely independent woman who keeps me grounded." She laughed, then grew serious. "I won't always be easy to love, you know. I have a lot of walls still coming down. Good thing I'm patient then." He pulled her closer. "And completely, utterly committed to proving that love and success aren't mutually exclusive." As she settled into his embrace, Emily realized that perhaps the real challenge wasn't in facing other people's judgments, but in learning to accept that she deserved both professional success and personal happiness. The road ahead might not be easy, but with Ethan by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came their way. 1 year after that fateful morning, when Emily accepted a ride from a mysterious stranger, she stood in her father's hospital room, watching him pack his belongings. The doctors had just given him a clean bill of health. The aggressive treatment Ethan had helped secure had worked better than anyone expected. "Ready to go home, Dad?" she asked, helping him fold his sweater. "More than ready, though I must say that private room was quite luxurious." He gave her a knowing look. "Your Ethan certainly knows how to take care of people." "He's not my Ethan," she protested automatically, then smiled. "Well, maybe he is." As if summoned by their conversation, Ethan appeared in the doorway, carrying a bouquet of flowers. "For your new garden," he explained to Emily's father. "I heard you're planning to take up gardening now that you're better." "Indeed I am. And you two are my first volunteers for the heavy lifting." The three of them laughed, and Emily felt her heart swell with happiness. This was her family now, expanded, strengthened, complete. Back at work, Emily had finally found her stride. She'd accepted the promotion she'd initially turned down, and her team's success spoke for itself. Those who had whispered about favoritism fell silent in the face of her consistent achievements. "The board approved your proposal for the new community outreach program," Ethan told her one afternoon, in a properly scheduled meeting with the door open. One of their many compromises to maintain professional boundaries. "That's wonderful. When can we start implementation?" "Immediately." They were particularly impressed with the focus on supporting families dealing with medical hardships. His eyes softened. "You've turned your own experience into something that will help others." "I had good inspiration," she replied, thinking of both her father's struggle and Ethan's generosity. Later that evening, as they walked through the park near their now shared apartment, Ethan seemed unusually quiet. "Everything okay?" Emily asked, squeezing his hand. He stopped walking, turning to face her. "I've been thinking about the future." "Oh," her heart skipped a beat. "This past year has been the happiest of my life. You've changed me, Emily. Made me a better man, a better leader." He reached into his pocket. "And I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of your love." Emily's breath caught as he dropped to one knee, holding out a simple but elegant ring. "I'm not asking because you're perfect, though to me you are. I'm asking because your stubbornness challenges me, your integrity inspires me, and your love completes me." He took a deep breath. "Emily Carter, will you marry me?" Tears sprang to her eyes as memories flooded her mind. Their first meeting, their struggles, their growth together. How he'd supported her father's recovery while respecting her independence. How she'd helped him find balance between being a CEO and just being himself. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss, Emily realized that love wasn't about power dynamics or social status. It was about finding someone who saw you completely and loved you anyway, flaws, walls and all. "You know this means more office gossip," she teased as they walked home. "Let them talk," Ethan replied, pulling her close. "We know what's real," and they did. Their love story might have started with a chance encounter between a struggling assistant and a powerful CEO, but it had grown into something far more meaningful, a partnership of equal, built on trust, respect, and an unwavering belief in each other. 5 years later, Emily stood at the podium of Montgomery Enterprises' annual charity gala, now in her role as Director of Community Outreach. The program she had started years ago had grown into one of the company's most successful initiatives, helping hundreds of families facing medical hardships. "When I first joined this company," she began her speech, "I was struggling to balance work with caring for my ill father. Today I'm proud to say that not only is my father here with us," she gestured to where he sat, tending his prized roses having become his new passion, "but we've helped over 1,000 families face similar challenges." From the side of the stage, Ethan watched his wife with pride. Their journey hadn't always been smooth. There were still occasional whispers about their relationship, still moments when Emily felt she had to prove herself, but they had faced every challenge together. "Success isn't just about profit margins," Emily continued. "It's about making a difference in people's lives, and sometimes the biggest changes start with one simple act of kindness." She caught Ethan's eye and smiled, remembering that first car ride. After the speech, as they mingled with guests, a young intern approached Emily nervously. "Mrs. Montgomery, your story, it gives me hope. I'm also caring for my sick mother while trying to build my career." Emily squeezed the girl's hand. "Come see me on Monday, I think we can help." Later that night, as they walked through their garden where Emily's father had helped them plant a variety of flowers, Ethan pulled her close. "You know what I love most about you?" he asked. "My stunning business acumen?" she teased. "That too, but mainly how you've taken everything life threw at you and turned it into a way to help others." Emily leaned into his embrace, thinking about their journey. She was no longer that stressed assistant trying to make ends meet, nor was he the lonely CEO hiding behind his position. Together, they had built something meaningful, not just their love, but a legacy of helping others. "We did good, didn't we?" she whispered. "We did great," he corrected, kissing her softly. "And we're just getting started." As the city lights flickered below, Emily realized something. Love wasn't about status or wealth. It was about trust, growth, and choosing each other, again and again despite the odds. Did you enjoy this modern love story of Emily and Ethan? Their journey from a chance meeting to a beautiful relationship shows us that true love can overcome any obstacles. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need a reminder that love can appear in the most unexpected places. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Emily and Ethan's story and build a community of romance lovers here. Leave a comment telling me what country you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming love stories like this one. Your support helps us create more content that reminds us all that love knows no boundaries, whether they're social, economic, or professional.